Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jean Reefer. I'm moderating session J5. This session is titled Mitigation Planning and Outreach. And we have three really great presentations to go through for our final session of the day and of the conference. Our first presentation is called Pivot, the one with the new approach to public outreach. This presentation is being given by Lori Laster. Lori is a stormwater management engineer for the Papio-Missouri River Natural Resource District. Lori has 15 years of experience in stormwater and floodplain management. And she is also the Secretary of Nebraska Floodplain Management and Stormwater Managers Association and the Chapter District 5 Director for ASFPM. She's joined by Brooke Secord of JEO Consulting. And I'm just gonna let you guys take it away. Thank you.
Welcome to our presentation entitled Pivot, the one with the new approach to public outreach. My name is Brooke Secord, and I am a hazard mitigation and emergency planner with JEO Consulting Group.
And I'm Lori Laster. I'm a project manager with the Papio-Missouri River Natural Resources District in Nebraska. Nebraska has a system of natural resources districts throughout the state based on watershed rather than political boundaries. The Papio-Missouri River District is the smallest district in the state, and we cover the eastern border with Iowa along the Missouri River. 6 counties from Dakota County to Sarpy, and we have the Omaha metro area within our district boundaries. Our population is about 740,000 people. The mission of NRDs is to conserve, manage, and enhance our natural resources. And part of that has to do with flooding. And so for a long time, we've been involved with FEMA projects, FEMA mapping, and other flood control. Because we are set up to cover multiple jurisdictions, we have been coordinating a hazard mitigation plan since 2006 for all of the communities within our district. So we cover all 6 counties, and we currently have 42 participants in the plan out of 64 entities that are eligible to participate. We have been able to have projects funded through HMA grant programs throughout all 6 counties. And we address quite a few hazards, including a few man-made hazards. And we did add a public health emergency for our 2021 update, as we've all seen what that can do.
And as part of every hazard mitigation plan update, there are specific requirements for public outreach. Knowing that the Omaha metro area and other large incorporated communities are located primarily in the Papio NRD district, we had some additional public outreach methods laid out to begin with. Those included 2 public open houses, the first of which was supposed to have been held in March of 2020. That open house was really designed to help introduce the public to the hazard mitigation process, describe the goals and objectives that were going to lead the planning process over the next year and a half, and talk about the overall hazards that were going to be evaluated throughout the plan. As you can imagine, with the development of COVID-19 in early 2020, that public open house did end up being canceled. We had a second open house that was scheduled during the public review period that was held in early 2021. That public house was actually converted to a virtual format, but wasn't the most successful endeavor that we've ever seen, as Lori will talk about here in a little bit. That opportunity was supposed to be held in order to allow community members and jurisdictions to review the final information of their community profiles, provide revisions or feedback, before it was finally submitted to NEMA and FEMA for their review and approval of the plan overall. Other methods of outreach included specific meetings with our community rating systems communities. Those are Omaha, Papillion, and Valley in the Papio NRD boundary, And then other stakeholder and community outreach methods included letters to stakeholders, such as health and care facilities, our fire districts, the tribes that are located within the boundary, and community outreach. We created a flyer that was posted at various locations throughout the district. There were social media posts shared through county emergency management web pages and general word of mouth as we tried to share the information of this planning process. Additionally, as part of the planning process, we developed a specific project website to host all of the information related to this plan update. That website was called Papio-Mitigation.org and is going to be held and hosted by the NRD throughout the lifespan of all HMPs. Rather than having a single page that provides some basic information during the planning process, this project website is designed to hold both the most updated and current HMPs, but also serve as a dedicated and permanent site to highlight project successes, other mitigation resources, funding that may be available, and to provide contacts to all of the agencies that may provide other assistance and guidance for project implementation.
So we had this plan and we had our first public open house scheduled for March 25th of 2020. And on about March 14th, we realized that that was not going to happen. So we pushed it back to May, the end of May. And as we get closer to that date, we realized that also was not going to happen. So we decided to pivot. And much like Ross and Rachel from the television show Friends, we had to cram a lot of information and a completely new outreach plan into a very short time period. We had previously attempted to use social media outreach when we updated our plan in 2016. We had created an online survey geared to gather information from the general public. We posted that survey on the district Facebook page one time, and we got 7 whole responses. So could that be any more unsuccessful? Probably not. So we needed a new strategy, and we knew that. But thankfully, between 2016 and 2020, we had learned a few lessons. We had hired a new information and education director whose background was in advertising and journalism rather than mitigation. And that was really one of the keys to the success of this strategy. In trying to explain to her what we needed to do, we had to break it down so that she understood, having never been exposed to much of the language before. And so between myself and Jen, our I&E director, and JEO, we started thinking, how are we going to get people to fill out this online survey that we had created? And we figured that, offering prizes for some sort of a game was most likely the way to gather interest for that. But because we needed to turn this around in a short amount of time, we had to pull in some outside resources. MediaSpark is an advertising firm here in Omaha, and they help us to take that game idea and refine it. And then they created some really eye-catching graphics to help those posts on social media stand out. They also suggested that we contact local influencers. The Omaha Scanner and Sarpy Scanner pages, basically they live stream the police scanners and the sheriff's department scanners and let you know what's going on. Anytime anything is dispatched, you can go and look at their Twitter feed and see, that there was an accident or, and sometimes you get some crazy stuff on there, but they have a very large following within the area. And so they agreed to work with us because one thing that they are geared towards is public safety. So they agreed to post our ads as well.
The final game theory that we came to was a matchup for Would You Rather of our various hazard events that are profiled overall in the H&P. With the help of MediaSpark, we ran a 5-week ad campaign on social media. It included a video ad and boosted Facebook and Twitter posts. Both Sarpy and Omaha scanners then retweeted or reshared all of the posts that were originally on the NRG's website or their social media page to really hit that super broad audience that both of those influencers had. For each of the posts, people that commented on the post or interacted with it were eligible or put into a raffle for a t-shirt, which Lori and I are sporting currently for each survey. And then additionally, there would always be a link to both the website or the survey that we would ask people to fill out. And for each person that completed the survey, they were then entered into a raffle for a $50 gift card. One of the posts that you would see on the screen now was one that we ran in the beginning of the process. And it stated, would you rather experience the creeping disaster of a drought or the rapid destruction of a tornado? Comment with your reason below for a chance to win a cool t-shirt. That link would then lead them to the Papio-Mitigation.org website so that they could explore some of the other information about the planning process, learn what steps they could take, and then also fill out the really important survey that provided us with such great feedback from the community members themselves. Some of the other matchups that you'll see included thunderstorms versus blizzards, earthquakes versus floods, and then agricultural disease or wildfire. You'll notice that we did not include man-made hazards or public health emergency in this matchup. We really wanted the focus to be on those natural hazards that are really what the H&P is designed to address, as well as types of projects that may be eligible for grant funding through the hazard mitigation assistance programs. In particular, if we're going to talk about public health emergency at this point, it can be a really red button topic, and we wanted to ensure that we are getting cohesive and specific information to really guide future project implementation for our communities through natural hazard mitigation.
And so, as you can imagine, when you put something on social media, we get some pretty interesting answers. I did want to highlight a few of the responses that we received. This was kind of the general overall feeling for each post. Nebraskans would rather see a tornado than a drought because, well, we apparently enjoy sitting out on the front porch and watching tornadoes. Not the smartest thing, and that does demonstrate we need a lot more public education. They would rather have a blizzard because, you know what, we're pretty used to it. So most people have their stock ready to go. They'd rather have a wildfire than a crop disease, and they'd rather have a flood than an earthquake. So how successful was this campaign? Very. Our posts reached over 52,000 unique people, and 17,543 people viewed our video. And over 2,700 people clicked to the website to look through the information and fill out the survey.
The survey itself was super successful as well. It was designed to ask specific questions of the everyday resident. These included what past hazardous events that they had experienced themselves and their impacts from them, household and community-wide mitigation priorities, what they would like to see or have assistance with both at home and in their communities, and the preferred outreach and communication methods that they would like to receive information for those different storm events. In total, we had over 700 responses to the survey. In the survey, we also requested that they provide us their zip code so that we could compare that to the planning area itself. We had 657 unique responses from just within the planning area. As you can imagine with social media, we did have the oddball answers from Arizona or Missouri, but we really wanted to hone in and focus on this specific area. All 6 counties that are located within the Papio NRD were represented, as well as 19 unique communities therein. You'll notice that we even had some communities that may not fall entirely within the Papio NRD boundary, such as Pender from Thurston County, who participated. However, as the county participates over well, and Pender is the largest community in the county, it's really valuable to see those priority levels and how they may spread out through the entire county and to what the county officials can also do. Through all of those 657 responses, we tabulated up all of their answers and came to some both surprising and not surprising answers. We evaluated what their top hazards of concern were going to be, what was most of concern to the everyday resident. And while many of us, our everyday lives and our springs are consumed by flooding damage, the everyday person's top hazard of concern is actually high winds and tornadoes. Flooding was mid-level for them. So this really kind of shows when we go back to making sure that we're identifying the specific hazards that need to be addressed for our community members. As you can expect, because we live in Nebraska and this is what we experience every year, severe thunderstorms were the #1 most commonly experienced hazard. And then their preferred communication methods in order were emergency text alerts, social media posts, radio broadcasts, and updates to local websites. It's kind of gratifying to see the emergency text alerts as the preferred method of communication because we know that many of the counties in the district are already implementing either Code Red or Alert Sense or other emergency text alert systems, and that is something that their communities do want to see. We also asked about what community members would like to see their jurisdiction implement into the future to mitigate the risk to natural hazards. With 700 responses, we got everything that you can imagine under the sun as an answer. However, there were really common themes for community resilience that they wanted to see. Those included addressing climate change at the local level, expanding education and outreach efforts, specifically when it comes to practicing hazardous exercises, making emergency shelters more available, or even providing additional tree care from the community level to prevent future property damages and potential injuries as limbs drop during hazard events.
One thing that we learned that you should not do in a campaign such as this is ask an open-ended question. And this graphic was week 5 of our ad. And it was really designed to push people to the survey. This was our last push. And so it was, what hazards concern you? We want to know. And as you can imagine, again, with the social media interaction, we got some pretty oddball answers. Here are some of the more G-rated answers that we got. Distracted drivers, carbon monoxide, lack of sidewalks for pedestrian safety, stupidity, and my personal favorite, the ex-wife's meatloaf. And while we know that these are all hazards to our community, they're not exactly what we address with our hazard mitigation planning. And so what we will do for the next time is make sure that we are asking very pointed questions and making sure that we're getting the answers that we really need.
We learned quite a lot throughout this process and came away with some major points and lessons learned. One of the top ones was that mitigation is not a top-down effort. For many of you guys that are either elected officials or hold a position in a state agency, you understand the process that you may have a really great project that would solve a lot of problems, but if you don't have community support, that project is not going to be implemented successfully. We learned that projects that come from the local level that are shared concerns across residents in the community really needs to be translated up the chain to identify where those areas are of need. We also learned that public engagement data from social media is really good for identifying those overall high-level priorities or concerns, but maybe not so good when it comes to getting specifics. When we are filling out grant applications or really trying to develop a scope for a project to address a concern, we need to get more into the nitty-gritty details. So that may be a one-on-one conversation with specific community members, or if it needs to be an elected official at either the city, county, or state jurisdictions to understand what the project is overall.
We also learned that working with local influencers really helps to increase our reach to the community. On our own district Facebook page, we only have a few thousand followers, where we have over 700,000 people who live within the district. So working with these influencers who have a much larger fan base really helped to spread the message and help to get more engagement with the survey. And we also learned that people kind of like this a little bit more than an open house. I thought our open house plan that we had originally created was a little bit more unique than what we've done in the past. I was excited about it. But after seeing how many survey responses we got through this campaign, I think we would continue to do this in the future. Unless projects are controversial, you don't get more than 10 or 20 people to show up to an open house. So having 700 survey responses versus 10 or 20 people coming in to tell us about something was really, it was exciting and it was valuable in making sure that we are including the public. And then we saw several comments like this. Thanks for asking our opinions. And people seem to really appreciate, hey, I have an opportunity to express a concern or to express a need that I see in my community without having to really, take time off work to go and talk at a county board meeting or a city council meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And this is, a much less intimidating way for people to express their concerns. And so that was a really nice thing that we saw. And with that, I really encourage anybody to look at what they're doing for social media and look at what they're doing for outreach. This was very successful for us, and I'd love to talk to you about it. There's my email and my phone number. Please feel free to give me a call at any time. And thanks for coming today.
Well, thank you for that presentation, Lori and Brooke. I really, I was watching your presentation earlier, and I really loved the oddball questions that you got. And I'm sure there were several others that were just as entertaining. We have a couple of one or two questions in the chat, but I had a couple of questions that I wanted to ask. One is, do you think that the use of social media was so successful because it made it much more accessible to everyone in your community?
Yeah, I think that has something to do with it for sure. We try to have our meetings in the evenings where more people can attend them, but a lot of times meetings are maybe at 4 o'clock when people aren't getting off till 5. In the evenings, they're still, dealing with kids and, making dinner and all of that stuff. And so asking people to come to where we are, I think is, no matter what time of day, is a hindrance. And so, when you can sit down and look at your phone at, 11 o'clock at night or whenever it is that people are doing that, and they can fill out a survey right then and there, I think that really helps to get more people that you wouldn't be able to reach otherwise.
I would add that it entirely also depends on the population of our planning area. The Papio NRD actually hosts the largest metropolitan area in the entire state, the city of Omaha, as well as other large communities such as Papillion and Bellevue. But we also have a very wide range of geography in the district. There are a lot of small rural communities. We have a reservation in the district as well. So our methods of outreach for them, social media is really great for our large cities and the younger populations that really inhabit there. but that one-on-one communication, whether we're having public meetings or phone calls directly with our rural communities, is also a really valuable thing for us to be doing at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thanks. Just a comment. Let's see here. I'm doing two things at once. Oh, here we go. This is a good one. There was a comment from Joe Kafari. He says, having an outside person not necessarily familiar with the technical terms and aspects of what a district does is invaluable. Our county communications department has really made a difference in how the community receives our messages.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. We saw that certainly throughout this campaign is, you know, Brooke and I, we do this all the time, and we know the lingo and we know the acronyms, and we'll start to rattle off facts and figures and stuff just out of our heads. And Jen would sit there and be like, wait, what was that? You know, and then we'd have to stop. And then working with the advertising team as well, they were asking the same questions. And it's like, well, why do you want it that way? And so we would have to really stop and think about it and realize that if you don't have a background in mitigation, you're not going to know what it really means. So yeah, it's 100% invaluable.
Just a minute here. Getting a lot of good questions in. Someone asked, do you think that this effort was able to reach the underprivileged population too?
I would say that we probably missed some of them for sure. You know, that's not an area that I'm familiar with. So I know that, you know, going forward, as long as we're not in a pandemic, I would want to do more in-person outreach as well, and actually going into communities, because depending on, you know, sometimes a smartphone is their only form of communication, but sometimes they don't have even that. So there certainly is a percentage of that population that we missed.
Mary B asks, what will you tweak in the future to enhance this engagement process overall?
Well, first, we're not going to ask open-ended questions anymore, ever. I think we know that.
No matter how amusing the answers were, right?
Yes. You know, I think one thing, we did this in a matter of about 2 months, you know, coming from the initial idea to actually, like, you know, pushing the button and it's out in the world. So taking some time as we're planning, as we start planning to kick off the project, I think would help. Brooke, do you have any other things?
I think that as we move forward for public engagement strategies for hazard mitigation plan updates, because they are required to be updated every 5 years, recognizing the value and importance of social media and online virtual outreach is really valuable to us. We obviously need to do some additional more local on the ground sort of outreach, but if we can say anything out of the pandemic, one of the few benefits was that we at least had the technology here to continue to garner input from the local level. If a pandemic like this had happened 5-10 years ago, our response would have been incredibly limited, and our ability to even like outreach and share information about the hazard mitigation plan update may not have reached hardly anybody. But in this circumstance, we know that we reached over 52,000 people that may have never known what a hazard mitigation plan is. And now that they at least know that that resource is out there, they may have additional ideas, and then they can go back to their community leaders and share their mitigation priorities that they have as well.
Great, great. There's a couple of comments here that kudos that I just wanted to let you know. Celinda Adair says, great presentation. Carrie Romano is a resident of the district, and she can testify that it worked. I saw the post in the wild and found it really easy and fun to participate. So good for you guys. Congratulations. There's just one last thing here if we have time. If we have time, John Powderly says your social media campaign and the use of Would You Rather game is great, truly innovative. Were you able to get any demographic data from the social media data? And what was your, and how was your coverage of all the demographic sectors?
Oh, go ahead, Brooke, if you have any.
We did, and I enjoyed diving into that. It was actually really interesting to see that there is a very large young population that participated, obviously, because millennials and young people are very much glued to their phones. But it was also really surprising that there was not a steep drop off when it came to the 40s to 60s period. Or age demographic, and that was primarily centered in the Omaha metro area, probably because they're some of the most tech savvy. We have primarily a lot of farming communities outside of that district, but it was really interesting to see that that bell curve was not so pronounced just at the low end of the demographic spectrum.
Great, thank you. Somebody's asking, your social media outreach campaign is very innovative and engaging. Did you have any live events to engage the public?
No, not at this time. We were it kind of pushed everything back, the pandemic, so we were running 2 to 3 months behind. And so that may be something that we consider in the future. We do have several large kind of public festivals that are natural resource related in the area that we maybe would have done something there. But again, those weren't held this year. And so we'll see what the future brings.
Okay. Well, I don't have any other questions in the chat, but great presentation. Love the theme. So I want to thank you both very much for being with us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Alison Miskiman. Alison's going to be talking to us about staying engaged in mitigation during a global pandemic. Alison Miskiman is with Tetra Tech, and she has 15 years of experience in mitigation planning and expertise in GIS, natural hazard risk assessment, and benefit cost analysis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alison Miskiman with Tetra Tech. Thank you for joining me this afternoon for my presentation entitled Staying Engaged in Mitigation During a Global Pandemic. I am the Mitigation and Resilience Technical Director at Tetra Tech. Our practice has been facilitating hazard mitigation planning and assisting communities with FEMA grant applications, BCAs, conceptual design and engineering, and grant management across the country for the past 15 years. Hazard mitigation is one of the 4 phases of the emergency management cycle. It is a critical phase to determine how we can take action during blue skies to reduce or eliminate long-term risk to life, property, the economy, and the environment from the next hazard event. In order to remain eligible for FEMA hazard mitigation funding, you need to have a FEMA-approved hazard mitigation plan in place. Hazard mitigation planning has evolved over the years, as has Tetra Tech's planning process. However, COVID challenged us to make sure hazard mitigation planning continued during this national disaster. Our hazard mitigation planning process follows 8 phases, with public and stakeholder engagement occurring from start to finish. At Tetra Tech, we strive to develop an action plan that reduces natural hazard risk and pride ourselves on the journey, the planning process, and not just the end plan deliverable. We partner with our communities and set them up for success by not only helping develop the action plan, but implementing the priority actions identified and prioritized. We don't want our plans to sit on a shelf for 5 years. We want the communities we work with to use them and have the planning process set them up for grant funding, whether that be the annual FEMA mitigation funding cycle, FEMA flood mitigation assistance, or BRIC, building resilient infrastructure in communities, or post-disaster through HMGP. While working with numerous communities across the US in 2019 and into early 2020, many had scheduled hazard mitigation plan updates to be completed with a FEMA approved plan by the fall 2020 to ensure they remain eligible for HMA funding and could apply for FEMA, FMA, and BRIC. As it was the first year of BRIC, there was much excitement, and certainly many of our communities that we work with had plans to submit applications, which meant we needed to ensure that the FEMA hazard mitigation plans were current and updated. Enter March of 2020, COVID-19. First, as you know, there was a complete shutdown. The emergency managers, public health officials, municipal staff across all departments were pulled in so many directions, and hazard mitigation planning was not the priority, and understandably so. As a result of COVID-19, many people began working from home, or they had reduced schedules, and we were limited to collaborative planning via email, telephone calls, and virtual meetings. Historically, we have convened meetings to gather our planning partners for workshops in person. We're not fans of strictly classroom style meetings. We collaborate, we have roundtable discussions, we pull out large scale poster maps, we write on them, we share best practices at our meetings. We make sure that when we meet, we leverage everyone's time and we get work done. But how are we going to continue holding workshop style meetings in a virtual environment during COVID and keep attendees engaged? To engage the public, traditionally and pre-COVID, we would attend already scheduled community events like festivals and senior wellness days. We would design meetings and hold them at academic institutions and have meaningful conversations about hazard risk. We would ask residents what's happening in their communities. Where are they seeing challenges and impacts? How would they like to see the problems addressed? As a result of the changes in 2020, we needed to retool and come up with other engagement strategies to interact during COVID and keep our planning processes moving forward while staying safe, and really leverage this as an opportunity to reach broader audiences. The usual face-to-face interactions for hazard mitigation planning has been limited over the last 12 to 13 months. In order to meet with communities, school districts, utility districts, counties, and states that participate in hazard mitigation planning and keep the public engaged, we needed to turn to different platforms to communicate seamlessly and effectively to our mitigation partners. We had to leverage technology. Like many of you, we shifted to virtual team platforms like this one, which allowed us to present to large audiences. We shared our screens, we turned on our cameras, and were able to see one another. It was definitely an adjustment at first, but we quickly realized that we started seeing increased attendance numbers. Instead of one municipal representative showing up to the meeting, multiple people were attending. We were able to invite a greater number of stakeholders to our meetings and not be limited to the meeting room sizes like we often had to when we were meeting in person. And we were able to open up more meetings to the public or advertising via websites and social media because more and more people were using their electronic devices. It is challenging to have meetings with a large number of attendees and ensure everyone has an opportunity to share and contribute. Prior to COVID, we used SurveyMonkey and Google Forms and other similar platforms to solicit information electronically. Traditionally, our environmental scientists and folks that work in the field would leverage Esri's Survey 123 platform to collect field data. But during COVID, we quickly learned that we could also leverage Esri's spatial platform to inform mitigation planning. We started using Survey 123 to collect vital spatial feedback from our planning partners. Here's one example. As part of our planning process, Tetra Tech prioritizes the identification and collection of community lifelines and evaluates their vulnerability to natural hazards. The mitigation of lifelines, as you know, is a priority of FEMA's BRIC program. By using Survey 123, we could very easily show our planning partners how to add new assets to our inventory using this form. By a simple click of the mouse, you can add a new point over on the map here, hover over your location, and immediately this is added to our database. In addition to collecting these valuable assets, we've also been collecting additional data like problem areas, historic areas of impact, flooding outside the floodplain, using this tool, building a very robust geospatial inventory that feeds into our risk assessment for our planning partners. The tool enables our partners to share their feedback from their desktops, provides accurate data as we leverage the aerial imagery in street maps, and enhances the structure-specific inventories used for our risk assessments. Traditionally, we have used websites and still do, and we design them and maintain them for our clients' mitigation planning. But technologies such as ArcGIS online products like StoryMap and dashboarding have provided increased opportunities to reach planning partners and stakeholders in a quick and accessible format during COVID. The effect of these technologies goes beyond collecting data and information. There are far more benefits. They provide a space for people to be heard, feel heard, to collaborate as they once did at in-person meetings. And we were able to stay connected during the planning process. We have enhanced our mitigation planning experience with story maps, which is a great interactive platform to reach many people at once, promote project awareness, and report major milestones as we serve as a risk communication tool. So this slide here illustrates an example from the Kauai County, Hawaii Mitigation and Resilience Plan. We outlined the planning process for residents to have an understanding of the steps that we were taking to update their mitigation and resilience plan. We have pages dedicated to hazards of concern with pictures and interactive maps to display for folks to learn and gather more information. A great risk communication tool that was developed during the plan update, but will continue on as a risk assessment tool beyond the planning process. Here are some additional examples. We have them organized in many different ways. You can have pages dedicated per hazard with descriptions, those interactive maps and displays I mentioned, and hyperlinks to state and regional resources for more information. Here's an example from Suffolk County, New York, where we have a tab per hazard of concern, so you can very quickly drill down and find the information that you're looking for. As I mentioned, these interactive hazard maps are extremely valuable. You're able to zoom in and pan around and see where the areas of impact are based on the delineation of the hazards of concern. This is an example from Kauai County again, where you can search by address, and you can use the legend and the layers and toggle them on and or off to see the areas that may be impacted. Perhaps you're looking at your place of residence or your business. Here is the city of Oakland, California's hazard mapper that we developed. This example shows their liquefaction susceptibility, which is a component that we include in our HAZUS modeling for the seismic hazard. We also organized the earthquake scenarios that we evaluated in HAZUS, and so you're able to expand these on the left and see the results that the model provided. Sonoma County, California is another one of our clients. Their story map combines hazard mapping with dashboarding to summarize hazard exposure to buildings, population, and other assets in graphical summaries. You can change the hazard that you're looking to gain more information on by using a drop-down menu item here. This is how we designed this one. Just another way to have an interactive experience and find the information that you're looking for. Here's yet another example of our combined story map and dashboarding. We customized this dashboard so you can pan around the map and change the graphical summaries to reflect the information that you're seeking here. The tabs at the top of the screen help you organize the data and enable users to very quickly find their information. These graphical summaries have received rave reviews from residents. They're providing their at-a-glance summary that some folks are looking for, but it also provides others the deeper dive of more detailed information and allows them to have an engaging experience and allows them, and that we're finding, to ask more questions and stay a bit longer and learn a bit more about their community's hazard risk. You can also zero in on a specific area or neighborhood. This is all driven by GIS, but you don't need to know GIS in order to find your way around. So we're designing these with pre-populated drop-down menu items so you can zoom into your area of interest very quickly and customize this depending upon your needs. The key word here is customize. There are so many options to make this your own and tell your story about hazard risk and hazard mitigation. To ensure we could still conduct workshop style meetings in this now COVID virtual environment, we have set up these interactive sites to follow our agendas as well. So this example shows how the story map tabs align with our agenda topics. With embedded survey 123 links, we were able to request feedback from meeting participants and refresh the dashboards so participants can see information coming in near real time. It also allowed participants who were not able to attend the meeting to still contribute information to the workshop and the overall plan. And this workshop was designed to take place over multiple days. So following meeting 1, we were able to synthesize the information and summarize it for meeting 2, and then build upon that information, have the attendees review the data received, validate it, and then inform the next phase of mitigation strategy development. In the past, pre-COVID, I should say, we would hold those in-person meetings and have workshops set up to invite the public, residents to view our hazard maps and the risk assessment results. We would have the FEMA HAZIS program estimated potential losses available for the earthquake, wind, flood, and tsunami hazard scenarios that we evaluated at the ready, so they could find out more. We would then print out a report and have them take it home, and it summarized their home or business's risk to the hazards of concern. And this facilitated family conversations, right, regarding what their property may be at risk to. Do they have adequate insurance coverage? What can they do to mitigate their future risk? But again, during COVID, these in-person meetings for the public with these HAZIS workstations that we call them just were not possible. So we built a hazard mapping tool that we made accessible online to mirror this public meeting and share information, all from the comfort of people's homes. This is the example from Suffolk County, New York, where we have it embedded into the story map, and we have a specific tab called Hazard Mapping Tool that you can click on, and it opens up the Hazard Mapping Tool page. You can enter in your address to find your property. You could just use the pan, zoom around the map and find your area of interest. And once you do, you click on the screening widget and you draw a box or a circle around the property that you'd like to investigate. And it's highlighted here as an example. Once that happens, we are able to run a report, and the report will summarize the hazards that intersect that area. So this, yet again, is a tool that the county can leave beyond the planning process and serve as a continued risk communication tool for residents. This slide is showing the hazards that are being screened, and then an actual report is able to be downloaded and printed so that you actually have a tangible piece or tangible summary of the hazards that may impact your area of interest. Another interesting item to note, once these story maps went live, we really saw some great responses. We embedded the citizen survey and our stakeholder surveys right as individual tabs in the story map. And the results and responses just increased exponentially when the story map went live. So just more evidence that these are effective engagement tools that residents are responding positively to. In addition to leveraging technology in engagement, we strive to use technology solutions to support plan maintenance and project implementation to ensure that the benefits of mitigation planning is realized. As part of the hazard mitigation plans, as many of you know, you need to report progress on previously identified actions. This is a FEMA requirement, and typically this is performed on an annual basis to maintain the plans and meet state requirements. And for those that participate in the community rating system or CRS, you also have to do an annual progress report. And so Tetra Tech developed a proprietary automated progress reporting tool, lovingly called the BAT tool. It stands for Baseline Assessment Tool, that allows users to log in via their desktops. It is pre-populated with the mitigation projects from your hazard mitigation plan. and it enables jurisdictions to access their information from their desktops and track the implementation of their projects. To give you an idea how this works, this slide shows an example of what a single jurisdiction will see upon login. They log in and they only have access to their information. And this is set up so that way this community only accesses their community's information. If I were a county leading a multi-jurisdiction plan, the county could log in and see all of the jurisdictions. But I'll just show you a township example here. This is an example for the township of Juliet. And this township has 15 projects in the program, which mirror the projects in their hazard mitigation plan. And the graphical dashboard summarized for them that of the 15 projects, they reviewed 9 of them, but 6 still need to be reviewed. And on the right here, this graphic dashboard summarizes the implementation status of those projects. So you can see that one project has been completed, several are in progress, and several have no progress reported. Below these dashboards, we have the individual projects listed. So that way you can just dive right in and report progress on the one in which you're responsible for. So when you go to the next page and you click on that action, this page opens up. This page is pre-populated with all of the attributes for that project as noted in your mitigation plan. All of the attributes required by FEMA are in here. What you need to do, step 1 is enter your name. So that way we can have a historic log of who is contributing to the progress reporting here. Step 2, you select an item from the drop-down menu for the action status. Have you made any progress on implementation? You select the one that best fits. After you complete steps 1 and 2, the rest of the page activates, pre-populated with all the information in your plan, and you can scroll and review to make sure it is accurate and updated. Make changes as needed, and then hit the save button. It is as easy as that. It takes minutes to do. There's no more emailing back and forth files or exchanges of paper. You can share this hyperlink within your departments, within your community for the municipal officials that need to review their actions, and it's done right from their desktops. All of this data rolls up into a formatted report that you may customize and then submit for your annual maintenance requirements, whether that be to the county, the state, ISO, what have you. So a very easy way to keep your plans updated and report progress on your actions. Independent of COVID, but just a better use of technology, a recent feature that has been used quite heavily is the query functionality. States and regions have been logging in to query projects in their jurisdictions. So based upon their priorities, if they have funding available, they may share that high priority flood projects are ones they're looking to fund. They can very quickly query based on the plan, based on the jurisdiction, based on the flood or other hazard type, and find those hazards and find those actions very quickly and export them to an Excel file. It's a great database of your projects that can be used at all levels of government. So states can have visibility to all of the communities within their jurisdiction as where they are with their mitigation plan reporting. Counties, if they have a lead a multi-jurisdiction plan, can see how quickly on the dashboards, how folks are doing with their plan reviews. We have built in an automated email functionality that gently reminds the points of contact it's time to review your actions. So it's a little bit of a hands-off approach. You don't have to worry about it. We set the reminders built into the schedule here, and folks can log in and maintain their plans. Interestingly enough, folks have also been querying for water and wastewater projects for the American Rescue Plan. So again, a great database that you have access to for mitigation planning and project status tracking. Well, I hope this presentation provided you an overview of the creative solutions we've recently used to collect data and input from planning partners and the public and synthesize and communicate the results in an effective and engaging way during our hazard mitigation planning process. Again, my name is Alison Miskiman. I'm with Tetra Tech, and I thank you again for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, or feel free to contact me directly. Thanks again, and have a great rest of the conference.
Alison, thank you very much for that presentation. We don't have any questions in the chat yet, but I have several comments that I wanted to cover with you. What a great use of story maps and dashboards. I have recently been introduced to dashboards and I absolutely love them. I was wondering, I was interested in seeing how the use of the dashboards can be incorporated into the hazard mitigation plans such that they can become a true living document. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah, I love dashboarding as well. It's just such a effective way to summarize the information that can somewhat be overwhelming when you're looking at tables and tables of data. And so it really has provided us a means to summarize graphically really important statistics that we're trying to communicate to folks. And to your point there, what is in our story maps reflects the content in the mitigation plans. So we are trying to ensure that the story maps live on beyond the planning process, because these are 5-year plans and they can be updated over time. So just because they're developed during the plan update, as communities implement projects and they implement these measures to mitigate risk, they can update the dashboards to show success. So we really see this as another version of a plan online to engage residents and just provide an ongoing source of education and outreach.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that occurred to me when you were giving your presentation is that you probably by using this technology and having it all available to the general public online, you probably had a much greater reach than you would have if you did a traditional hazard mitigation plan. So it's almost as though, you know, the pandemic has been a blessing in that regard, that you've reached so many more people. Do you have any statistics or anything about how many more people you might have reached through this process?
Sure. I can share that, oftentimes we would pre-COVID hold open houses and invite residents, and we would reach out to community organizations and try our best to advertise these in-person meetings. But just like Lori, the previous presenter, was sharing, sometimes it's hard for people to get away in person. And so we saw this as an opportunity to reach different demographics, a larger audience. And, oftentimes we hold meetings and we would just have 1 or 2 residents that would come in, and we'd be so thankful, right? But using these story maps, we would, before they released, we would put out the citizen survey that is embedded in them now, just over social media. And we would be really happy if we got about 50 to 60 responses. But as I mentioned, when the story maps went live and the citizen survey was embedded, we saw that we went from 50 to 60 responses to over 500 in a matter of days. I mean, it was just so refreshing that people were really responding to this. And I think because it was so accessible and people were at home looking, for information, this was something that we took an opportunity and, or took an obstacle and turned it into an opportunity. Yeah.
So do you think that this is an approach that you will continue to use in your hazard mitigation planning activities?
Absolutely. I feel like now it has become something that we will continue doing with or without COVID, because it has been such an effective tool and the response has been so positive that we're now expanding the interactive web mapping, and we're using it as ways to conduct our meetings and as a way to demonstrate that this is accessible information and it's something that everybody should feel empowered to seek if they have concerns or questions in their community. So hands down, we're absolutely continuing it because of the response, and plus they're super fun to create. So Jeannie, we're definitely not stopping.
That's great. That is really great. I have one comment here from Laura. She states, it's a beautifully developed story maps, Alison. How did the jurisdictions distribute the links to the story maps? Through social media or email lists? Could you track the amount of activity to identify the best way to extend the outreach?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. We tried every way, just email distribution lists, email, blasts, whether it be from the county, the jurisdictions, or some stakeholders that were involved on our steering committees. We definitely leveraged social media, so Facebook and Twitter. We would accompany the links with some graphically pleasing images to catch people's eye and then draw them to either the website or the story map. So yeah, I would say any which way we could get that out, because we couldn't be handing out flyers or going into, going to academic institutions and putting up, certain information like hard copy. We tried every type of electronic communication that we could.
That's great. Alison, we're going to have to cut it short here, but really great presentation, beautifully done. And please give my regards to Rob Flanner.
I sure will. I sure will, Jeannie. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have one other presentation to look forward here to this afternoon. The presentation is going to be turning obstacles into opportunities. This is being presented by Vikram Shrivastava of Atkins and Mike Schlesinger of Atkins. Vikram is the project director, is a project director at Atkins, specializing in natural hazard identification, risk assessment, and mitigation. And Mike Schlesinger has 16 years of experience in flood hazard modeling and mapping. Let's cue up the video and see what we have to see. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Today, Mike and I will be speaking about some outreach innovations spurred on by the travel limitations of COVID-19. Our presentation will include a discussion on the background leading to these innovations, information required by community officials at flood risk review or FRR meetings, a demonstration of the Atkins FRR dashboard, explore options on virtual open house meeting rooms, and end with some key takeaways. Following the 06 and 08 flooding, the state of Iowa embarked on developing updated analyses and firms for all of its 99 counties. Atkins has been an Iowa CDP consultant since 2011 and been involved in the updated firms for 34 of these counties. With the issuance of the preliminary for Plymouth County in November 2020, Iowa now has statewide digital flood hazard mapping, either preliminary or effective. A typical flood hazard mapping study involves in-person meetings and communication, but due to COVID-19 and the travel limitations, no such in-person meetings or communication was possible. We still had to move our mapping studies forward. Therefore, we required additional outreach tools to provide the information to community officials and property owners on these new mapping studies.
So having been through several flood risk review meetings, we began figuring out what pieces of information are most useful to local floodplain administrators. The main pieces of information that they're looking for are, what are the impact of the new SFHA on the building structures, and where are the areas of SFHA expansion and contraction? So once these pieces of information are determined, that will help them identify the neighborhoods or business districts where significant changes are occurring. And this information will help them determine, what is being added to the floodplain and what is being removed, and most importantly, what type of outreach will be needed and where it will be needed. So based on those key needs, we've developed a flood risk review dashboard that helps bring that information to the community officials in a clear, concise, web-based platform. This dashboard is based off the changes since last firm layer, and it uses building footprints as the two main pieces of information that make up the analysis. So once we know where the changes are occurring to the SFHA, we can obtain the counts of the buildings that are being removed or added to the SFHA. Also, as you zoom in and out, you can easily see the color-coded areas of the SFHA changes from increase and decreases. Another handy feature that this dashboard has are the counts that are on the bottom of it. This is a dynamic counter that will update based off of your current zoom extent. So the pieces of information that we have set up on this this counter are the newly added buildings within the map view, newly removed buildings within the map view, buildings that are experiencing BFE increases and buildings that are experiencing BFE decreases. So again, as this is a dynamic counter, if you want to see what the numbers are at a county level or a city level or even down to the neighborhood level, all you have to do is zoom to that particular extent and those numbers will update for you. So in a snapshot, this is kind of the main information that a floodplain administrator, could report back to his or her elected community officials. It'll just at a snapshot, it'll tell them or show them, how many residents are newly added to the floodplain and how many residents are being removed. And depending on how the SFHA changes are impacting each structure, we have it set to color code them accordingly. As these colors pop out, you can identify the particular structures that are newly added or removed. And as we feed more information into it, we can determine other factors that pertain to each structure as well, such as if we add water surface elevation grids, we can determine what the BFE is at that structure, and also if that BFE is increasing or decreasing. Another piece of information we've been using is the percent annual chance rasters and the 30-year chance rasters. So when you click on a building to identify it, all that information is available on a per structure basis. Now with all that, we can start to tell a lot about each of these structures. What is the flood risk change? What is the new BFE? What is the annual chance of flooding on that structure? And what is the chance of flood at any given point during a 30-year period? So with that, I'll jump into a quick demo of what this looks like. So we'll start here in the city of Humboldt in Humboldt County, Iowa. And based on this current view extent of our newly modeled area, we have a count of 11 buildings that have been added into the floodplain. We have a count of 88 buildings that have been removed from the floodplains. And then within this updated area, we have 14 buildings that are experiencing BFE increases, and we have 129 buildings that are experiencing a decrease in the BFE. So as I zoom in and pan around throughout some of this data, you'll notice that these numbers start updating along the bottom. Another thing that I'll point out on this viewer is the flood risk change areas. You'll see that we have areas of red, areas of blue, and areas of green. These red areas are representing the areas of floodplain increases or the expansion in the flood zone. The green areas are the opposite, is where the floodplains are contracting or decreasing in size. The blue areas are representing the areas that are being maintained as an SFHA from the effective into our new study as well. Also in these areas, we have the building footprints laid on top of it. And you can see that we have the same type of green buildings, blue buildings, and red buildings. So as you can see, this red building here is intersecting a BFE or an SFHA increase area, and so this one would be considered a newly in building within the SFHA. And we have some green ones here and these big areas where the floodplain has decreased in size. We have several buildings that are being removed from the floodplain. And then we also have the blue ones that were in the floodplain in the effective, and they're still in the floodplain in the new one. So as you can see, these numbers are changing as we're moving through here and looking at some of these areas of change. We come to another area, this neighborhood that has had some change where there's several being removed from the floodplain, a handful that are remaining in, but there's also some that are newly added to the SFHA. So when we click on these, we start to look at the information that's compiled here. So since this is a building that is newly mapped into the floodplain, we don't really have any effective information to pull from here, but we do have our new BFE. So we have a 1065.5 BFE at this newly mapped location. So where that could be useful is a floodplain floodplain administrator could provide this outreach information to the homeowner to see if they wanted to get an elevation certificate, or see if they have any survey data to see if their structure is actually located with a lowest adjacent grade or a first floor elevation at 1065.5 or above. If so, this might be a good candidate for a LOMA. Also in these areas, we of the no change areas where the buildings are in the effective and in the new, they remain in the floodplain. However, now that we have a new information, we can find out what the change to the BFE is and how that's impacting this particular structure. So in this one, for example, you can see that we have an effective BFE of 1066.1, a new BFE of 1064.7. So even though it still remains in the floodplain, you can see that we have a decrease in the BFE here. Where this could come in handy is, again, the floodplain administrator or community official can reach out to this homeowner to see if they have a elevation certificate, survey information, or anything that shows that their structure is actually above this new BFE. And maybe they exist somewhere in between the effective and the new, in another case for a potential LOMA here. So all this information was brought up, using this 1% annual chance water surface elevation raster. So when you think of a water surface elevation grid, what it is an interpolated raster surface that's created from the model cross sections that provide a seamless BFE throughout the floodplain. So you can kind of think of it as a draft point and click BFE finder. So as you click around throughout anywhere where there's a blue or red area, we'll have a 1% annual chance water surface elevation raster behind it, and we can see what that value is. So we have a 1065 here, the 1067 up here. So you can use this to click around if there's not a building footprint, or if you just want to know what the water surface elevation is at any one given point between two cross sections. So as we've been using these dashboards through some studies in Iowa, we're finding that it's providing a lot of useful information already served up to the floodplain administrators and the community officials. One of the big things that they're finding is this GIS data that's produced during a flood risk study, maybe sometimes large and cumbersome to deal with. So we're serving this up in a easily digestible format for them, and so they don't have to go out on their own and set up their own GIS or purchase a GIS if they don't already have it, to be able to house this information and look at it and provide the analysis that it takes to show these changes that are happening at a structure by structure level. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Vikram, and he'll talk about some other innovative ways that we're providing virtual outreach to communities.
Open house meetings are used to share the preliminary information with the public. Property owners can learn about the impact of the new analysis on the flood risk and flood insurance for their property. Due to COVID-19 travel limitations, the Iowa DNR has been using Zoom for CCO and open house meetings. These meetings have worked quite well, with cameras turned on for two-way interaction and leveraging mapping portals to share information on the mapping changes for particular properties. But it's not the same as a property owner walking around talking to the DNR, FEMA, or the consultants on the engineering analysis. Therefore, the Atkins developed the Iowa DNR virtual meeting room portal. It mimics an in-person meeting with different stations for engineering analysis, the new mapping, changes, flood insurance, appeals, and questions and interaction with the DNR. I will now demonstrate this virtual room to you. This virtual open house meeting room or portal can be accessed on a mobile device, tablet, or personal computer. As people may be unfamiliar with interacting with this room, we offer a welcome video which directs them on how to interact with this room. Armed with information from this video, people can interact with this room, or you can experiment. The first station is a preliminary fact sheet. You can access the fact sheet with the big, bold, click here in red icon button leading towards a PDF icon. So here we have the preliminary fact sheet developed in Word, saved as a PDF, which is easy to customize and replace if need may be. Having established the convention of having people access the information by the PDF icon, we've had that maintained throughout the whole room. In this case, we have the injury analysis station, the know your risks station for your property, and what has changed station. Again, interacting with the PDF icon leads you to a PDF document. In this case, the PDF document has a live link, which we can click on and be bounced to an existing online resource. In this case, I'm interacting with the irfloodmaps.org website. The next two stations are for flood risk and appeals. Again, the PDF icon leads to more information. Now, having a very simple document with a PDF link allows us to quickly, if need be, change the document or define it for a particular situation or location. If after visiting all these stations, a property owner or a visitor has any questions, we offer a questions or a DNR interactions station where they can learn about the DNR individual who they can contact, their phone number, and their email address. In this case, we also offered a Microsoft Teams meeting, which can be accessed by a link below. And that link would then allow them to enter a Teams meeting on a given day and time to interact with the DNR and their consultants. Therefore, we have developed a very easy to revise and leverage tool for providing information in bite-sized chunks to property owners as if they were at a real live in-person open house meeting. Therefore, our key takeaways were, by developing these resources for remote outreach, was that it's important to understand the audience you wish to reach, what information that audience wants, and how they will use it, and to provide that information clearly and easily.
Thank you all for attending the session. We have a little bit of time remaining, so if anybody has any questions, Vikram and I will be around to help answer them, or if you want to send an email, our contact info is on the screen. Thank you.
Vikram and Mike, thank you so much for that presentation. That I was very impressed by the use of the virtual open house. What a great idea. We do have some questions in the chat, but I had one I wanted to ask to kick it off. For the FRR geospatial dashboard and being able to count buildings in or out, our buildings that have been removed are added. How do you feel like Risk Rating 2.0 might change how you present this information?
I can jump in here, Mike, if you don't mind. So my understanding is that FEMA will use Risk Rating 2.0 for the insurance rates. However, the mapping will still determine who should or should not pay for flood insurance, and therefore the dashboard as a way to provide the change of people coming in on leaving the SFHA, will remain. And if we do move towards a graduated flood risk, data set or schema, we can also show that very easily because it's fundamentally an Esri dashboard. And so we can very easily modify this and add data sets to do this. It's not static. So.
Okay, thank you, Vikram. I have a couple of questions here. Why don't we start with this question from Mark Pearson? Do you think these new tools and protocols for outreach will stay in place even after the pandemic is considered over and we're able to meet in person again?
I'm an optimist, so I would say yes, for two reasons. The FRR dashboard is meant for community officials, and having used it in City of Davenport with the Scott County PMR going on, we can convey to them the mapping with the symbology already done and let the community officials actually focus on finding out who's impacted, where there's change, and not worry about loading the data or symbology or access, you know. But in the case of the virtual open house meeting room, I do think that there are a number of people who would like to participate and have the intention to participate in these meetings, but can't come out. And so what I do see happening in a post-COVID period is having all going back to in-person meetings, but also having the virtual open house remaining and providing a very similar experience of stations and being walked between stations to get information and be able to, if you have any questions, reach out for more information or context.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. By the way, I grew up in Davenport, Iowa. So.
Wonderful.
I have another question here from Mary. Is your flood risk review dashboard aimed at the community floodplain administrators, engineers? Do you run an instructional video before presenting the dashboard to a community? You may have kind of touched on this previously, but if you don't mind, Vikram, answering that one.
Yeah, I can take that one.
Great.
As Vikram said, it is typically shown to the floodplain administrators and the engineers, but in the flood risk review meetings, we do invite the elected officials as well to be present. Also in these the flood risk review meetings, the data is still draft at that point, and it's the first time that a lot of times they're seeing the data within their communities. So that's kind of the main intent of displaying it to them. And we in the past we've been hosting them ourselves. So we've been using the flood risk, the FRR dashboard during the meetings, through a Zoom call, and they can kind of see how it's used and how it works there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. I have another question here. If anybody else has any more questions, please put them into the chat on Slido. Did you have an existing building footprint data set that you leveraged for the flood risk review dashboard, or was it something you developed specifically for this project? And there's a follow-up question after you answer that one.
The building footprints are used. It's the Microsoft building footprints. They're readily available through download. I believe I got them through GitHub. So I think they have a couple of versions out there, but I downloaded the latest version of that for this particular project. But since it is an ArcGIS based software, you could put whatever building footprints that you do have. So if you did have community supplied building footprints, you could get better, more accurate results than using the Microsoft data sets.
So the follow-up question is, are those building specific stats something you shared in the past at in-person flood risk review meetings, or is it something new with your virtual approach?
It's been new since the virtual approach. We have this new dashboard to share, so we started using all the data available to us. So yeah, it's new for us here since we've been in the virtual.
Okay, and then I have a follow-up question to that, and that is how up to date is the data that you're getting from GitHub, and how readily available is it in more rural areas?
I'd have to go back and check when the data is from on the Microsoft building footprint data. I can't remember off the top of my head. I want to say it was available around 2018, 2019. So fairly new. And so far in these, in the more rural areas where we're producing these studies, we've had coverage. So it does a pretty good job of having coverage even in the rural areas.
Okay, great, great. I don't have any other questions in the chat. Is there any other information that you would like to elaborate on with regards to this approach to depicting the data, the geospatial data?
This is Vikram here. I do think what our last slide is to find out who the users are for information, and less try and show off our toys, but more try and find out how can we get them what they want in the easiest way possible, using things which they're now used to, for example, cell phones and tablets, whatever, you know. And not be held back by our traditional work maps or, you know, we must meet in person formats, you know. Try and break through our previous stereotypes and connect with people the way they want to connect and get information.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, Vikram, that's something that I've recently been introduced to, is the concept of human-centered design. Mm-hmm. And I think that's exactly what you're trying to get at, is, you know, what is the information that people want to see or need to see, and how can we best present it to them in a way that's easily understood and is also easily updated. So, well, Mike and Vikram, thank you so much for your presentation today, and all of the presenters that were in this session. Everybody was absolutely fabulous, and I was just absolutely amazed by all of the innovation that's being brought. That's an outcome of our pandemic experience. So thank you very much. I think this is the last session of the conference. So you can all go home and relax now.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you. Bye now.
Bye.